All right, so let's get started. Hello everyone, this is your friend Naman. I humbly welcome you all to our YouTube channel, that is UPSC by Naman Raj Gupta. Today we are going to start with lecture number 41, and as you can see on the board, we are going to dive into one of the very astounding theory of Karl Marx, that is Marx theory of revolution. So this theory of revolution of Karl Marx is also a kind of prelude to the idea of Marxism, right? So Marxism is a political ideology. So the Marx theory of revolution is a kind of prelude or preface of Marxism. So basically the entire idea of revolution will be divided into three parts. That is, what is revolution according to Marx? Okay, why or what is the cause behind that particular revolution? Why people should go for revolution, right? Why the working class should go for the revolution? As you can see here, the workers of the world unite because you have nothing to lose, and how they will be able to do so, right? So these are the three part, you can say, of the theory of revolution, which will kind of do entirety of the theory and also be a prelude to the theory of Marxism that we are going to see in our later course of lecture. All right, so with this, let's get started. But before starting, I would humbly request you all to like the video and also subscribe the channel. All right, so let's get started with Marx on revolution. So what is revolution according to Marx, right? So Marx propounded the idea that revolution means total change. It is a total change. Revolution means when the mode of production changes, right? Political revolution is no revolution. So according to Marx, when the mode of production, and as in the previous lecture we have already discussed, the mode of production according to Marx is basically consist of two modes, right? That is means of production, and relations of productions and relation of production. What is means of production? Means of production basically meant all the technology, resources, and etc. But here for Marx, the relation of production is very important because it comprises of various relationship in the economic sphere, right? So relationship like what? Relationship like capitalist and workers, relationship like feuds and serfs, right? Relationships like the owners and slaves in the state of nature. So this is the relationship of production. That is where Marx was majorly concerned of, right? Because his major problem were the capitalist class, and that is why he propounded to the workers class that the workers of the world unite because you have nothing to lose other than your chains, right? And hence you can see this capitalist class, they fall under the purview of relation of production. So according to Marx, the revolution means this total change in the relations of production, right? There should be no class division. So he also propounded the idea that there is nothing called as revolution in India, right? He is giving two perspectives when it comes to India and China, because we have seen revolution in our country, that is China, that was the political revolution. Basically in India it was a political revolution. Why it was a political revolution? Because it was a just transfer of power from British to India, right? It was a mere transfer of power. In India the basic structure remained intact, right? What was the basic structure? The basic structure was basically the feudal economy, right? Here we saw the prevalent of zamindari system till the very late of the 1960s and 70s, till the land reforms act and etc were enacted. Till that time we have seen the feudal economy intact, right? The zamindari system and etc. That is why Marx is expounding the idea that there is no change in the situation of masses. Why? Because or rural poverty. Why? Because it was just a political revolution and not the real revolution as per Marx, right? And what was real revolution, or what is real revolution according to Marx? It is basically a complete change in the mode of production or relations of production. This is when Marx will say that yes, real revolution happened. That happened in China according to Marx. How? Because peasant revolution took place in China. It was violent overthrow of feudalism, right? It was a violent overthrow of feudalism in China. Peasantry established control over land, right? So in China communism had been established in land, right? We have seen the Mao Zedong's revolution, right? So they have violently overthrown the feudal economy in their countries, that is China, and they have established communism when it comes to the land and feudal land and their economy, right? So it was the basic idea of revolution when it comes to Marx, right? So the two things that we need to keep in mind is, according to Marx, the revolution is basically the violent overthrow of the mode of production, right? He did not bothered about the political revolution, he did not bothered about social revolution and etc. He propounded the idea that once the economic he propounded the idea that once the economic revolution takes shape, the entire will follow on, because it is the basic pedestal upon which the institutions or other institution has been established or built upon, as we have discussed in the theory of society in just the previous lecture. If you guys haven't watched the previous lecture, I sincerely request you all to go and have a watch of the previous lecture, because here it is a continuity of thought that you will be building, right? So entire theory is kind of interconnected in the in the magnum opus of Karl Marx, that is the Communist Manifesto, right? So he is giving a kind of one theory after another so as to build that basic idea and establish his theory, that is the theory of revolution at the end, right? So this is the basic idea when it comes to the essence of revolution in terms of Marx. But here, what is the cause of revolution, right? What is the cause, or why workers should go for revolution, right? So here the Marx is expounding the idea that this term is very, very important, inherent contradictions in capitalism, right? According to Marx, there are inherent. What is inherent? Something which is inbuilt, something which is inbuilt, right? Something which is innate, something which is innate. There are natural contradictions in capitalism, right? So capitalists dig their own graves. He is saying that capitalists dig their own grave. It shows contradictions in capitalism which will result into destruction of capitalism on its own, right? Marx is saying that there are certain contradictions in capitalism, certain problems in capitalism which will lead to its own destruction. The purpose of, and what is the basic cause or basic issue behind that contradiction? He is saying that the purpose of production should be need, right? The purpose of production should be the need, the need of human beings, whereas in capitalism it becomes greed or profit. This is one problem, right? So according to Marx, the purpose of production should be need. But what is happening in the capitalism? Capitalism is basically driven by the idea of greed or profit. So this is the first problem. Capitalism creates the contradiction between man and society. This is the second contradiction. How it creates the contradiction between man and society? Again, we have seen a theory of alienation, right? We have seen a theory of alienation, how the capitalist mode of production tend to create man alien from the society, which is a basic contradiction. Why? Because men or humans are social animals. We cannot exist without society. But the mode of production or the process of production is such in the capitalist society is that man gets alienated from the society. Man gets alienated from the product of his labor. Man gets alienated from his peers or from his social people, right? So this is how it creates other contradiction between man and society. The other person is not a fellow human being, rather a competitor, a source of insecurity. This is the third contradiction. Here Marx is saying that in capitalism, the fellow being, right, the fellow being are not a human being. It is rather a competitor or a source of insecurity, right? Why? Because they are competing to have the ownership of limited resources. They are competing. Why? Because they are driven by their profit and motive of greed, right? They want to accumulate more and more wealth, and hence each and every one in the capitalist economy are mere competitors, right? And hence it becomes a zero sum game, right? Why? Because it will never end. And in capitalism, labor of the worker becomes the source of his own exploitation. This is the fourth problem, right? The labor of the worker becomes the source of his own exploitation, right? How? Because capitalism is driven by profit. To maintain profit, we have to keep the cost of production low, right? Hence, if the cost of production will be low, we can charge higher margin, the basic economy, right? And hence the profit margins will be more. To keep the cost of production low, workers will be given low wages, right? Because we have to cut on the factors of production, right? We have to cut on the wages, we have to cut on the rents, we have to cut on the salaries and etc., right? And this is how the workers will be given low wages. Ultimately they will lose their purchasing power, hence it will affect, or it will impact the economy at large. This is how the labor of the workers becomes the source of his own exploitation. The more workers are producing, the more the greed or the profit motive of the capitalism will increase. They want to increase their profit more. They will end up cutting the cost of production. Ultimately end up hampering the wages of the workers, right? So this was the brief idea about the contradiction in the capitalism, right? And because of all this inherent contradiction, there will be certain consequences, right? There will be some consequences. What will be the consequences? The rate of wages in capitalism will be hampered, right? The rate of wages in the capitalism will be hampered. How it will hampered? Workers cannot be given. So what is the principle behind the wages in capitalism, right? How capitalists think, right? Or how a businessman think when it comes to giving wages to the workers, right? So a capitalist think that worker cannot be given more than what is enough for his survival, right? A capitalist will think that a worker cannot be given more than what is enough for his survival. Let's say if I need rupees 100 per day for my 2 times meals, right? Let's say 50 for afternoon, 50 for dinner, right? So this is what a capitalist will think sufficient for a worker, because he cannot be given the surplus, because he may not come back to the work next day. What a capitalist will think, let's say if I give him a 200 bucks, he will end up consuming the entire 200 bucks in eating and etc. And hence once if he will be over eating things, he will not be able to come back again the next day. That is why the basic principle is that workers cannot be given more than what is enough, because they may not come back to the work next day, right? Wages are already low, and to maintain the profit maximum, to maintain the profit that is to maximum, they decrease the wages further, right? So on the basis of this principle, they keep the wage rate to the minimum. They keep the wage rate to the very basic or minimum, right? And again, the second thing, to increase their profit margin, they cut the wage rate further, right? So this is how the wage rates are deteriorated. Capitalist will bring technology. What will happen next? The capitalist will bring technology, right? If the revolution will happen, for example, Renaissance in European continent, right? There were several discovery of technologies like steam engines and etc., right? So if the capitalist will bring technology, others will also be forced to do the same. Why? Because they have to again compete with each other, right? So their cost of production should be minimum, right? And in order to minimize the cost of production, they need to take the help of technology, right? Technology. Why? Because technology can help to produce the things in volume, right? The technology can help in the production of very voluminous production, right? So it will result into loss of job of workers, right? If technology comes in, it will again result into the loss of job of workers. It means reduction in workers bargaining power. If the workers will not be having job, they will not be having money to spend, right? If they will not be having money to spend, they will not be having the bargaining power. Simple logic, right? So workers will be more in number, hence they will be forced to work at low wages, and hence if they will lose the bargaining power, the capitalist class will end up having more bargaining power, right? And hence they will start regulating the wages according to their own will. So as capitalism will advance, its contradictory nature will become more and more clearer. The exploitation will keep on increasing, right? Why? Because it will become a vicious cycle. It will become a vicious cycle. The more this particular capitalist economy will grow, the more technology will come in. The more technology will come in, there will be more loss in jobs, right? There will be more job losses. There will be less bargaining power of the workers. If there will be less bargaining power, again the capitalist will start exploiting the workers at their own will, right? So this is how the exploitation will increase. So this was the first consequence of the contradiction in the capitalism. It was the lower wage rate. The second was the disappearance of the middle class. So unfortunately, middle class is an unwanted child of capitalism. It is an unwanted child of capitalist. The more the capitalism will grow, the more the middle class will grow. But here in the case of Marx, it was contradictory. It was paradox. Why? Because it was paradox. Why it was paradox? Because the more the capitalism was growing, the middle class was disappearing, right? The middle class was disappearing. In normal time, what will happen, or what is out to happen, is basically when an economy grows, when a capitalist society grows, when a capitalism grows, there is an outburst of middle class. The people will enhance their quality and standard of living, and they will become a more middle class from lower classes, right? But in Marxist idea, what it was happening is that rather than growth of middle class were disappearing. How they were disappearing? Let's see. So capitalism is monopolistic in nature. Competition will become more and more tough, right? So capitalism is monopolistic in nature. What does it mean? So because of competition among the competing class, that is capitalist class, the capitalist will try monopolizing the business. Let's say if I am in the steel business, no other player should enter into my business. Why? Because that will hamper my profit, right? Because of competition, I have to cut the cost, and ultimately that will end up hampering my profit margin. That is why I will always try to monopolize the business, right? That is how the capitalism becomes very, very monopolistic in nature. Competition will become more and more tough, right? Only few capitalists will be able to survive. Small players in the market will keep going and coming out of market. Because of monopoly, right? Because of very tough competition, the new player who are wanting or aspiring to enter into market, they will end up failing in the business, right? This is very practical even to this days. Why there are a lot of startups that are failing? Because there are only few companies that have created their monopoly in the economy, and hence because of their bargaining power, it is becoming very, very tough for the new entrant to enter in the market, right? The best example is Jio. How Jio started and it created its monopoly in the market. Now for any new player, let's say Vodafone, Idea, and etc., despite they are being very, very old, but now they are still a very, very in nascent infantry stage, right? They are in very, very nascent and infant stage. They are finding it very, very difficult to compete with the monopolistic company that is Jio, right? And hence what it will end up happening, basically they will end up quitting the market, right? They will not be able to survive, right? So this is what is happening. There are multiple smaller players who are coming in and going out, right? They will also join the rank of workers, right? So it is very rightly said that, so the people who could not survive in the market, what they will do, they will end up finding other employment, right? They will join the rank of workers. A situation will emerge where society will be divided into the two classes, right? So ultimately a situation will emerge where the society will be divided into two classes, that is haves and have nots, right? So the people who are monopolizing the market, they will be having all the resources, right? All the ownership of the modes of production, and the people who are on the other side of the line, that is the working class, they will end up having nothing, right? This situation is basically called the polarization of classes. Why? Because there are two poles, right? On the one pole that there are capitalist class, on the other side there are the worker class or have not class, right? So on the one hand, small number of people will be holding the entire amount of wealth in the society. On the other hand, there will be mass poverty, right? This is what is very, very explicit on the slide. So this situation is basically lead to disequilibrium in the society, right? Why? Because there is a huge skewness, right? The difference will be very, very huge. On the one side, there will be people who will be amassing a huge wealth, and on the other side, people will be dying because of hunger, because of poverty. So this will lead to a situation of what? Disequilibrium, right? But here equilibrium is the law of nature, right? Equilibrium is a law of nature, and we cannot go against the law of nature, right? And likely the disequilibrium cannot continue for long. Why? Because it is against the law of nature, and revolution will what? Become imminent. It will re-establish the equilibrium. That is why Marx is saying how important revolution is, right? Why? Because revolution is helping to re-establish equilibrium in the nature, equilibrium in the society, right? As capitalism will advance, its exploitation will keep on increasing, right? Because of vicious cycle, and more number of people will be facing the exploitation, right? So this situation will convert class in itself into class for itself. This is an idea that we will see in what? How we have seen what, we have seen why, we are seeing why, right? In the next lecture we will see how revolution will take shape, right? So according to Marx, just to give you a brief idea, when the class consciousness will develop among the workers of the world, then there will be a revolution, right? So what is the basic idea behind class consciousness? When the class, that is working class, will become from class in itself to class for itself, right? Then there will be revolution, right? So the second cause was disappearance of the middle class. The third consequence is basically uncertain cycles in capitalism, right? So because of uncertainties, or because of contradiction, what were the consequences that we are seeing? The first consequence that we have seen was basically what? The lower wage rates, right? The second one was disappearance of middle class. The third one is uncertain cycles in capitalism. So as we all know that capitalism will always face cycle of boom and bust, right? As we have seen, the very, very exemplary example is basically the Great Depression, the Great Economic Depression of 1928, right? Just because of few European and Western countries, how the entire world shaped, how the entire world suffered, right? From their own, the idea of what? The idea of positive liberalism emerged, right? Liberalism emerged, right? In context of what? The negative liberalism or mercantilism, negative liberalism or mercantilism, right? So economists like Adam Smith and etc., David Ricardo, they were basically propounding the idea of laissez-faire economy, right? Laissez-faire economy. They were propounding the idea of what? Laissez-faire economy, where there should be no state to interfere in the economy, because there is an invisible hand which will ultimately controlling the market, and hence the state should only be a night watchman state. They should only confined to the law and order. They should not enter into the economy, right? This was the idea of Adam Smith in his laissez-faire system of economy. But after Great Depression, what happened? There were various economists like Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, right? They have expounded the idea of active role of state in economy. We need state to interfere in the economy so as to regulate the economy in order to eliminate any future threat, right? The example was the Great Depression, the economic crisis of 2007, the internet bust, and etc., right? So let's see how uncertain cycles in capitalism, they affect the workers, right? So capitalism will always face the cycle of boom and bust. It is a kind of law of capitalism, right? We cannot change this. Why cycle? as capitalism will advance, more and more number of people will become jobless, right? Will become jobless. Why? Because of technology, because of technology, because of technology, because of profits, right? As more technology will come in, as capitalists will be driven by their profit motive, they will be end up cutting what? The cost of production, right? And how they can cut the cost of production? Either by layoffs, right? Either by elimination of the employees or cutting their wages, right? This is why we are seeing major layoffs in today's time, right? Major layoffs in today's time. Whenever there is a recession scenario in any economy, what companies will end up doing? They will basically, the first thing they will resort to is basically laying off the employees. Why? Because they will end up saving their what? The cost of production, right? So this is how more number of people will become jobless. There will be lot of goods, but people will not be having the purchasing power. People are not having job. I am not getting my salary, right? So how will I be able to purchase things? Right? So let's assume a situation where technology, where companies are producing more and more goods, but people are not having enough money to buy those goods, right? It will result into the slowdown of economy, right? Ultimately what will happen? The companies will also end up not producing the things. Why? Because there is no one to buy those products, right? There will be more job losses. Hence capitalism creates the condition for its own destruction, right? So this is a kind of a destructive vicious cycle that capitalists have created for themselves, right? So they have basically dug their own graves, right? So capitalists dig their own graves. So this was the basically the third consequences. The fourth is the surplus value, right? The surplus value. Here in this particular picture you can see how a capitalist is kind of taking out everything from the pockets of the workers, right? Workers. So this is the entire idea behind the surplus value. वो बोलते हैं ना कि खून चूस लेना and etc. So this is the basic idea. So surplus value is profit according to Marx. So labor is a source of value in any good, right? So labor is someone, according to Marx, right? So according to Marx, labor is a source of value in any good. So why? Because labor is basically responsible for value addition in any good. A wood will not become a chair until and unless this labor will do a value addition as per his skill and arts, right? Then this mere plank of wood will become chair, right? So what labor is doing here? Labor is basically doing a value addition. That is why Marx is saying that labor is a source of value in any good. But in capitalism, capitalist does not give share to the workers in the profit, right? If they are the source of value addition, they should also have the share in the profits, right? Because this worthless piece of wood will not be having any value until and unless it is created into a chair, right? So if it is created into chair and sold in the market, the labor should also get a piece of profit. This is the very basic idea, right? Ideally workers should have share in the surplus. The surplus becomes capital, right? It increases the bargaining power of the capitalist, right? So whatever profit they gain, what they do, they make it as a capital. Why capital? To again reinvest in the industry, to reinvest in the factory, right? So as to generate more profits. So here what will happen? More workers work, more surplus is generated. More surplus is generated, the bargaining power of the capitalist will increase and the workers will decrease, right? Hence worker is forced to work where the labor is his body is working against him, right? Why? Because the more he labor, the more he will end up losing his own wage, right? Because the capitalist will end up investing the same amount back to their production, and again they will end up cutting the wages, right? So here the labor of his body is working against him, right? So this is a big contradiction. I will say a very big contradiction, where the labor of my body, the sweat of my body is kind of working against me, right? Generally, we labor for what? We labor for our good. We labor to get something to sustain, to survive, right? But here, according to Marx, the labor of one's body, basically the workers, are working against him. So this was the fourth. What consequences of contradiction? The last one is alienation. As we have already discussed alienation in the previous lecture, so the basic idea is there. Whatever people, when we talk about capitalism, when we talk about capitalism, when we talk about liberalism, basically the notion of freedom that comes to our brain, right? That the people are having everything, that is the material resources, in order to satisfy their needs, right? So that is freedom when we talk about the capitalist notion of freedom. But according to Marx, it is a false consciousness. It is a false consciousness. Why it is a false consciousness? Because here Marx says that in capitalism, the consequence or the fruit of production is not freedom, but it is alienation, right? Alienation from the process of production, right? The process of production has become so mechanized that man is reduced to mere cog in the wheel, as you can see in the picture, right? People are not able to express themselves in their production, right? So as we have talked about the example of a labor, or let's say carpenter, example of carpenter and wooden chair, right? Wooden chair. Here when he crafts this particular chair, his artistic manifestation can be seen through this beautification of the chair, right? The more beautiful it will be, the more artistic the carpenter will be. But in the process of production, in capitalist mode of production, what is happening? People have just become a cog in the wheel. They just have to take a screwdriver and they have to keep on cogging the nut and bolts. They have to keep on fixing the nut and bolts. So their job is just a mere cog in the wheel. They are not being able to realize their own self. They are not being able to realize their own artistic nature, right? So this is what is against the human capability. One should work for the realization of the self and not just for the mere necessities, right? The second alienation is alienation from the product of his labor. Production has become so much specialized that one does not even know what final shape his labor has got, right? In these factory lines, you can see several people standing side by side and just having a screwdriver and hammer on their hands and just doing their things. They are even not being aware what this particular thing will be shaped into at the end, right? So the second alienation is alienation from the product of his labor. The third alienation of man is from society, right? Working conditions are such that man does not have the scope for realization of his social nature. People are not having time to socialize, right? Because they are stuck in this manual production, right? And ultimately all this alienation will accumulate into the alienation from himself. People will get estranged from himself, right? The cumulative effect of alienation at three level is man gets alienated from himself. Hence there is no real freedom or happiness in capitalism, right? So this is what is the consequence of the contradictions, right? Because of all these contradictions, men should resort to the idea of revolution, right? If capitalists dig their own graves, capitalists die its own death, right? So if capitalists dig their own graves, right? So what is digging the capitalist graves? It is basically the contradictions in capitalism, right? Capitalism die its own death, right? Man also makes history, but only in given circumstances and not under chosen circumstances, right? Because in capitalism the circumstances are very, very chosen. People are chosen to work in certain mode of production. People are chosen to work in certain manner. People are chosen to work in certain way. They are made to work in certain manner. They are entirely regulated. They do not have their freedom or autonomy to decide on how, why, or what they should work. They are basically chosen and they are not given the circumstances to exercise their own will, right? So this is what Marx is saying, that man also makes history, but only in given situation. When they are given the autonomy, the freedom of their will, and not under the chosen circumstances. That was under capitalism. Though history is governed by the law of dialectics, again, go back to my back-to-back lecture and have a watch of what the law of dialectics was. The materialistic idealism in case of Hegel and Marx, right? See the theories. So though history is governed by the law of dialectics, as for the law of dialectics, negativity get negated, right? So he is basically, Marx gave the three idea, that was unity of opposition and negation of negation, and third was the quantity into quality. These are the three idea Marx has propounded when it comes to evolution of history in his theory of materialistic dialecticism, right? So here he is saying that all these contradictions are negative when it comes to capitalism, right? So according to the notion of negation, the contradiction will ultimately get negated. Since capitalism is full of contradiction, it will automatically get negated, right? But it does not mean that there is no importance of human action. It will get negated as per the evolutionary course of history, but it is not possible without human action, because human have to act, human have to create the history, and when they are given the circumstances, they will do so. Hence he inspires workers not to wait, rather than go for action, right? That is why he is saying to the workers that, workers of the world, unite, you have nothing to lose than your chains, right? Hence he says that man also makes history, but man does not make history in chosen circumstances, he makes history only in given circumstances, right? So with this we have come to a beautiful end. I am hoping that you guys have liked the video, and if you guys have learned any value from this particular lecture, I would humbly request you all to like the video and also subscribe our channel, that is UPSC by Naman Raj Gupta. If you want to give any feedback, please feel free to do so in the comment section. And until next time, this is your host, your friend, your guide, Naman, signing off. Keep striving, keep watching. Thank you.